Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The cargo bay reeked of burnt coolant and something organic that Rafe Coulson didn't want to identify. He guided his ship, the Vagrant, through the debris field with the kind of attention that came from years of not dying in places where most people have the good sense to avoid. The forbidden sectors lived up to their name. Quarantined after some corporate disaster nobody talked about, filled with the stripped carcasses of research stations and military vessels that asked the wrong questions. Aerys chimed softly through the cockpit speakers, detecting an encrypted signal, military-grade encryption, bearing 27 Mark III. Rafe's finger still, not individual or status faces, but typing 27 Mark III, battle home. Military encryption in a quarantine zone meant one of two things: valuable salvage or an elaborate trap. He'd learned to appreciate the difference. Source? He asked. Derelict research vessel, Cerulean Corporation Registry. Life support minimal but active. His jaw tightened. Cerulean didn't leave loose ends, which meant whoever was broadcasting had maybe hours before their air ran out, or something worse found them first. The smart play was to ignore it, finish his cargo run, collect his payment. The smarter play was to check if there was anything worth stripping from a corporate research vessel before the scavenger guilds picked it clean. "How's our fuel?" he asked. "Sufficient for investigation and continued course to Havre Station," Aerys replied. Rafe changed heading. The decision settled in his gut like bad liquor, but he'd learned to trust his instincts about which stupid choices paid off. The research vessel appeared through the debris, a sleek Cerulean design, maybe 200 meters, its hull scarred by what looked like weapons fire. Recent, too, scoring still showed heat signatures. His hand moved to the weapons console, bringing point defense systems online. "Life signs?" he asked. "Two. Biosignatures indicate non-human physiology. One adult, one juvenile." He docked with the vessel's emergency airlock, the magnetic clamps engaging with a shutter that ran through the Vagrant's frame. The airlock cycled slowly, pressure equalizing. Rafe checked his sidearm, then grabbed a portable scanner from the equipment locker. The scanner's weight felt reassuring against his hip as he stepped through into darkness. Emergency lighting painted everything red. His boots left prints in something slick on the deck plates, biological matter, partially dried. The corridor showed signs of violence, scorch marks on the walls, a section of paneling torn away to expose wiring. Someone had fought here, and judging by the blast patterns, they'd lost. The distress beacon's signal grew stronger as he moved deeper into the vessel. He squeezed through the gap, scanner raised. The bay was chaos. Workstations smashed, data cores physically torn from their housing, biological samples scattered across the floor in pools of preservative fluid. In the center of the destruction, beside an intact emergency pod, stood a woman. She held a small child against her chest, one hand splayed protectively across its back. Her other hand gripped what looked like a plasma scalpel, medical equipment pressed into service as a weapon. When she saw him, her posture shifted, not aggressive, but ready. Rafe stopped, raising his free hand slowly. "Easy," he said. "If..." She studied him with eyes that caught the emergency lighting in ways human eyes didn't. Her skin carried a faint luminescence beneath its surface, like light trapped underwater. The child in her arms possessed the same quality, but its features drew his attention. Translucent horns that curved back from its temples, delicate and branching like ice formations. "You're human," she said. Her voice carried an accent he couldn't place, each word precisely formed. "Last I checked," he replied, "humans don't operate in the forbidden sectors." "I don't operate anywhere specific. I go where the work is." Her grip on the scalpel didn't loosen. The child shifted against her, turning its head to watch him with unsettling focus. "Are you with Cerulean?" she asked. "Do I look corporate to you?" Her eyes traveled across his patched flight suit, the worn holster, the scars visible on his forearms. Something in her posture eased fractionally. "No," she admitted. "Good." "Because whatever happened here, I'm guessing Cerulean wasn't trying to help." He lowered his scanner. "I picked up your distress signal. You need transport? To where? She asked. Neutral space. I can drop you at Havris Station. From there, you're on your own. She glanced at the child, then back to him. He watched calculations run behind her eyes, risk assessment, probability analysis. Whatever she concluded made her shoulders drop slightly. I can pay, she said. I figured. He gestured toward the corridor. My ship's docked at the emergency lock. We should move. If I found your signal, someone else might too. She nodded but didn't immediately move. Instead, she crossed to one of the less damaged workstations and retrieved a small data module, tucking it into a pocket of her form-fitting suit. The movement drew his attention to her frame, slender but strong, the kind of physique that came from genetics rather than training. What's your name? He asked as they moved toward the corridor. Aerys, she said after a pause. Rafe. He led the way, his scanner sweeping for threats. What kind of research were you doing out here? The kind Cerulean initially wanted. Until they realized what it meant. Not an answer, but he'd been around enough people running from something to recognize when to stop asking questions. They reached the airlock without incident. The child hadn't made a sound the entire time, just watched everything with those two intelligent eyes. As they crossed into the vagrant, Aerys spoke immediately. Rafe, I'm detecting jump signatures. Multiple vessels entering the sector. His blood went cold. He pulled Aerys through the airlock, slapping the emergency close panel. How many? He demanded. 4. Military configurations. They're hailing us. He rushed to the cockpit, Aerys close behind. The view screen showed them, sleek vessels painted in Cerulean's corporate colors, armed far beyond what civilian regulations allowed. His hands flew across the navigation console, disengaging docking clamps. Play it, he said. A voice filled the cockpit, flat and emotionless. Unidentified vessel, this is Commander Voss of Cerulean Security. You are harboring corporate property. Surrender the genetic materials and test subject immediately. Failure to comply will result in termination. Aerys made a sound beside him, small, sharp, like something breaking. Rafe looked at her, then at the child she held. Test subject, not her child. Not her daughter. Her creation. Genetic materials, he repeated quietly. She met his eyes. The fear there was real, but underneath it he saw something fiercer, defiance mixed with desperate love for the small being in her arms. They'll kill us all, she said, to bury what I discovered, what I made. The lead vessel was closing, weapon systems warming up. He had maybe 30 seconds to decide. Rife's hands moved across the controls, bringing the vagrant's drives online. Aerys, plot a course into the asteroid field. Deepest concentration. That's extremely dangerous, Aerys replied. So is staying here. He glanced at Aerys. Strap in. This is going to hurt. She stumbled to the co-pilot's seat, securing herself in the child as the vagrant lurched forward. Behind them, the corporate vessels opened fire. The first impact threw Aerys against the restraints hard enough to drive the air from her lungs. The child, Aerys, made a small sound against her chest, the first vocalization since Rafe had found them. She tightened her grip, one hand cupping the back of the small head to protect those delicate, translucent horns. Rafe's hands moved across the controls with fluid speed, his eyes tracking 3 displays at once. The vagrant dove toward the asteroid field, and the debris that had seemed scattered from a distance became a wall of tumbling rock and frozen metal. He threaded between 2 massive chunks of what looked like a destroyed station, the clearance so tight Aerys could hear metal scraping against the hull. They're following, Aerys reported. Of course they are, Rafe muttered. Another impact. Weapons fire glancing off the aft shields. Alarm shrieked until he silenced them with a sharp gesture. The ship banked hard left, then rolled inverted, diving under a slow-spinning piece of hull plating the size of a building. Aerys' stomach lurched. The larger vessels are breaking off, Aerys said, but they're launching pursuit craft. Smaller ships, Rafe said, more to himself than to them. Fast, maneuverable, better pilots. He pulled up sharply, the G-forces pressing Ceres back into the seat. Aerys's fingers dug into her suit, but the child stayed silent, watching Rafe with those unsettling eyes. The asteroid field thickened around them. Rafe navigated by instinct and reflex, using the debris as cover. When pursuit craft appeared on the scanner, he changed vectors abruptly, putting rock between them and the weapons lock. Ceres watched the way his jaws set when he concentrated, the small muscle that jumped beneath the stubble. A pursuit craft got too close, appeared directly ahead through the view screen. Rafe didn't hesitate. He accelerated straight at it. The pilot broke first, banking away and clipping an asteroid. The explosion briefly lit the darkness. "One down," Aerys said. "How many left?" "2. Wait, they're pulling back." Rafe didn't slow. He drove deeper into the field, weaving between debris with a kind of precision that spoke of experience doing exactly this. Minutes stretched while Ceres's hearts hammered against her ribs, both of them, the dual rhythm of her species' biology providing counterpoint to her fear. Finally, he eased back on the thrust, letting the ship coast behind a massive chunk of ice and rock. The engines powered down to minimal output, heat signature dropping. They drifted in silence except for the quiet ping of the scanner and the sound of Aerys's breathing against Ceres's chest. "Did we lose them?" she asked quietly. "For now." He didn't look away from the displays. "They'll adapt. Send smaller craft deeper. We've got maybe an hour before they figure out the search pattern. An hour. Not enough time to rest, but enough to catch your breath." Ceres's hands were shaking. Delayed reaction to the violence, the near-death experience. She forced them still. Rafe stood, moving to a storage locker near the back of the cockpit. He retrieved a medical kit, then crouched beside her seat. His eyes found the cut on her temple. She hadn't even noticed it, but blood had dried along her jawline. "Let me see," he said. She shifted Aerys to one arm, tilting her head to give him access. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wound. This close, she could smell him. Sweat and ozone and something earthier, distinctly human. His species always ran warmer than hers, and the heat of his proximity made her skin tingle in ways she recognized from research but had never experienced. "It's superficial," he said. "Won't need sealing." "Thank you." He met her eyes at that, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement of the fact that he'd chosen to help rather than flee, that his choice might cost him his life. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "You could have left us." His hand paused in putting away the medical supplies. When he spoke, his voice was rougher. "Yeah, I could have." Not an answer, but honest in its evasion. He moved back to the pilot's seat, pulling up a navigation display. She watched the way the screen's light painted shadows across his features, the strong line of his jaw, the old scar that cut through his eyebrow. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Deeper into the sectors. There's an old way station about 6 hours from here. Used to be a smuggler hub before the quarantine. Might still have functional systems. Long-range transmitter if we're lucky. And if not, then we figure out Plan C." He glanced at her, then at Aerys. "You want to tell me what I'm risking my neck for? What exactly did you create?" Ceres's arms tightened around Aerys instinctively. The child looked up at her, and she saw trust there that made her chest ache. She'd spent 6 years studying this being, documenting every developmental milestone, every unexpected capability. But somewhere along the way, documentation had become love. "I'm a xenobiologist," she said slowly. "My field is genetic compatibility between species. For centuries, the scientific consensus has been that stable hybrid genetics between distant species is functionally impossible. The biological frameworks are too different, the DNA too incompatible. But you found a way," Reef said. "I theorized a way. Using a bridge species, something with highly adaptive genetic structures that could serve as a biological translator between two incompatible donors." He was watching her now, his full attention on her words rather than the displays. "Aerys," she said, stroking the child's head, "is proof that my theory works. Stable genetics, no degradation, no cellular rejection, a true hybrid. And Cerulean funded this? Initially. Yes, they saw commercial applications, medical applications. The ability to create hybrids could revolutionize genetic medicine, organ compatibility, even food production. She looked down at Aerys. But then they realized the political implications, which are, if hybrid genetics becomes viable, species barriers start to break down, mixed populations, shared genetics. The entire power structure of the galaxy is built on species remaining separate, distinct governments, distinct territories, distinct identities. My research threatens that. Rafe was quiet for a long moment, processing. When he spoke, his voice was careful, so they decided to erase the evidence. Everyone involved in the project, every sample, every data record. Her voice cracked slightly. Aerys. The child reached up, small fingers touching her face. The gesture was so gentle, so human in its empathy, that Ceres had to close her eyes against the sting of tears. She felt Rafe's gaze on her, studying the interaction. When she looked up, his expression had shifted, something softer beneath the hard pragmatism. "The child's not just research to you," he said. "No," the word came out fierce. "Aerys is mine. Not my creation, mine." He nodded slowly, and she saw understanding in his eyes. Whatever his past held, he recognized the distinction between biological obligation and chosen responsibility. Aerys shifted in her arms, turning to look at Rafe. The child's translucent horns caught the dim cockpit lighting, refracting it into subtle rainbows across the console. Small fingers reached toward him, curious, testing. Rafe went very still. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Aerys's fingers wrapped around his thumb, grip surprisingly strong for something so small. "Hey there," he said quietly. The child didn't speak, hadn't spoken since the attack on the research vessel. But those intelligent eyes studied Rafe's face with the same intensity Ceres herself had noticed. Analyzing, luring. The scanner beeped softly. Rafe's attention snapped back to the display, though he didn't pull his hand away from Aerys's grip. "They're spreading out," he said. "Systematic search pattern. We need to move." He gently extracted his hand, and something in Ceres's chest tightened at the care he took not to startle Aerys. She watched him bring the engines back online, begin plotting their course through the asteroid field. "Rafe," she said. He glanced back. "When we reach the way station, if the situation becomes untenable, you should leave us." His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to the controls, fingers dancing across the interface as the Vagrant began to move again. "Let's worry about getting there first," he finally said. But Ceres heard what he didn't say in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the controls. He'd already made his choice back at the research vessel when he could have fled. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't abandon them. She held Aerys closer, the child's warmth seeping through her suit, and watched Rafe navigate them through the darkness toward an uncertain sanctuary. The way station materialized from the asteroid field like a corpse, skeletal and gutted, but still tethered to existence by failing power systems. Rafe brought the Vagrant in slowly, watching for structural instabilities. "Minimal," Aerys replied. "One section maintaining atmosphere. Temperature 9 degrees below standard human comfort." He docked at what used to be a cargo bay. Through the view screen, he could see the way station's interior, emergency lighting casting everything in amber. Ceres had been quiet during the 6-hour journey. Aerys curled against her. The child had fallen asleep an hour ago. Every so often, Rafe caught himself watching them, the way Ceres's fingers traced gentle patterns on Aerys's back, the protective curl of her body. "Stay here while I check it out," he said. "We should stay together," Ceres replied. He saw the set of her jaw. She wasn't asking. "Fine, but stay behind me." The cargo bay was a graveyard of stripped equipment and scorch marks. Someone had fought here, recently enough that blast residues still darkened the walls. He led them deeper, following the map Aerys had pulled from the way station's computer core. The habitable section was smaller than he'd hoped, maybe 30 meters across, centered around an old operations center. The environmental systems were functional, and the door seals held. He activated the heating elements. "We'll set up here," he said. "There's a transmitter node 2 sections over. I'll see if I can get it operational." "How long will we be here?" Aerys asked. "Long as it takes to send a message to someone who can help." The next hour passed in practical necessities. Rafe stabilized auxiliary power and mapped functional systems. Aerys found a medical station and ran diagnostics on Aerys. He watched from across the room as she interfaced with equipment, her hands moving with practiced precision. When she finished, she crossed to where he was working on a power conduit. "Aerys is stable," she said. "But we need nutrition soon. Aerys's metabolism is faster than baseline for either parent species." Parent species. The phrasing caught his attention. "What exactly did you use for the hybrid genetics?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation he saw complexity, scientific pride tangled with something that looked like guilt. "I needed a bridge species," she said slowly. "Something with genetic structures capable of interfacing with both donor species. Something emotionally complex enough to support cognitive development. And you chose human." The word hung between them. Rafe's hands stilled. "Aerys has human DNA," he said, "as the bridge." "Yes." Ceres's luminescent eyes met his. "Humans are genetically unique, adaptable in ways most species aren't. Your capacity for emotional complexity, for forming attachments outside biological imperatives, suggested genetic structures that could support hybrid consciousness." He looked past her to where Aerys sat on a bench, small legs swinging. The child waved at him tentatively. He found himself waving back. "Does Aerys know?" he asked. "Not in any way that would mean something yet. But yes, on some level." She moved closer. "I chose human genetics because everything I'd studied about your species suggested capability for more than logic dictates. For caring without evolutionary benefit. Like protecting a kid you just met from corporate kill teams." "Yes." The word was soft, almost wondering. She stood close enough that he could feel the cooler temperature of her skin against the warmth of his. "I'm starting to understand your research wasn't just theoretical," he said. "No." She lifted a hand, hesitating, then let her fingers brush the scar through his eyebrow. "I wanted to prove connection was possible. That isolation between species was a choice, not an inevitability." Her touch sent electricity down his spine. He caught her wrist gently, holding her hand against his face. "You're playing with fire, Aerys. Perhaps." Her thumb traced along his cheekbone. "But I've spent my life in laboratories, studying behavior through clinical distance. I'm beginning to think I missed the point entirely." Iris's voice cut through the moment. "Rafe, I'm detecting energy signatures, multiple sources, closing on the way station." He released Ceres's wrist, moving to the nearest console. The display showed them 8 signatures, smaller craft moving with coordinated precision. "How long?" he asked. 12 minutes to breach range." He pulled up the way station's defensive systems. Most were offline, but environmental controls could be weaponized. Emergency bulkheads could be sealed. "Can we run?" Aerys asked. "Not fast enough. 8 catches before we cleared the asteroid field." He started routing power to the systems he needed. "We make our stand here, Rafe." "I know." He met her eyes. "But I'm not leaving you." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "Then we need a strategy." They worked quickly. Rafe set charges at key points, not enough to destroy the way station, but enough to make pursuit dangerous. He sealed off sections, creating choke points. Aerys proved unexpectedly capable, her scientific training translating to tactical thinking. Aerys stayed in the operations center, watching them prepare. The child's face showed no fear, just intense focus, too calm for someone so young. With 4 minutes remaining, Rafe gathered weapons from the vagrant, a plasma rifle, 2 sidearms, some grenades. He showed Aerys how to use the pistol, watched her grip adjust. You ever fire one of these? He asked. In training simulations? It's different when they shoot back. I imagine so. 2 minutes. He positioned himself at the primary entrance, using a half-destroyed console as cover. Ceres crouched behind him with Aerys. When they breach, he said, you take Aerys to the Vagrant. There's an emergency protocol, say sanctuary protocol, and the ship will undock automatically. And you? I'll buy you time. Wraith, you can't. I can, and I will. He checked the rifle's charge. Get Aerys somewhere safe. That's what matters. Her hand touched his shoulder. Why? She asked. Why would you die for us? He thought about that. About the calculations his survival instincts were screaming. The logical choice to run. About the small hand that had gripped his thumb. The trust in those unusual eyes. About the woman beside him who'd spent her life trying to prove connection was possible. Because some things matter more than not dying, he said. The first breach charge detonated. Metal shrieked as the hull buckled. Through the torn opening, he saw them, figures in tactical armor, weapons raised. Rafe opened fire. The first two went down before they understood what they were facing. The others scattered, taking cover. Return fire lit the darkness, plasma bolts scorching the air. He moved, using the environment like he'd been taught years ago, dropped 3 more with controlled bursts. The remaining attackers adapted, coordinating their assault. Professional, military training. A bolt caught his shoulder, burning through the flight suit. Pain blazed white-hot, but he kept firing. Dropped another. 2 left. They rushed him simultaneously. He took one down, but the second closed the distance. They grappled, went down hard. The rifle clattered away. Rafe got his knife into the attacker's side, felt the blade scrape against armor. Not deep enough. The attacker's fist connected with his ribs. Something cracked. Rafe headbutted him, bought himself space to reach his sidearm. One shot, close range. The attacker dropped. He struggled to his feet, breathing hard. Blood soaked his shoulder, dripped from his split lip. The door to a sealed section exploded inward. More attackers, a second wave he hadn't seen on the scanner. 4 of them weapons trained on the operations center, on Ceres and Aerys. Rafe moved without thinking, crossed those 8 meters faster than his injured body should have allowed. Saw Ceres's eyes go wide as she understood what was happening. Saw Aerys turn toward him, small mouth forming a word. He hit them from the side just as the attackers opened fire, his body between them and the weapons. Impact after impact, each one a hammer blow. He felt the flesh of his back tear open, smelled his own blood. They went down together, him, Ceres, Aerys, tangled on the floor. The world tilted sideways, color bleeding out. He tried to get up, to shield them again, but his body wouldn't respond. Ceres's face appeared above him. She was saying something, her hands pressing against his chest. Her luminescent skin blurred, doubled. He felt wetness on his cheeks and realized she was crying, silent tears tracking down her face, while her hands tried desperately to stop the bleeding. Rave, she was saying. Rave, stay with me. He wanted to tell her to run, to take Aerys and go. But his voice wouldn't work. The darkness was closing in. The last thing he saw before the world went black was Aerys's face, small and solemn, translucent horns catching the emergency lighting. The child reached toward him, and Rafe felt a strange warmth bloom in his chest. And nothing. The warmth spread through his chest like liquid fire, pushing back against the darkness. Rafe's eyes snapped open, lungs dragging in air that tasted of copper and ozone. Pain screamed through every nerve, but beneath it something else pulsed, energy that didn't belong to him. Ceres's face hovered above his, tear-streaked and shocked. Her hands were still pressed against his chest, but she wasn't applying pressure anymore. She was staring at Aerys. The child knelt beside him, small hands splayed across the worst of his wounds. Bioluminescent light poured from Aerys's translucent horns, cascading down in waves that seemed to sink into Rafe's torn flesh. The light pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Or maybe it was creating the rhythm. What? He tried to say, but his throat wouldn't go up right. Don't move, Sarah said. Her voice shook. I don't understand what's happening. This wasn't in any of my projections. The light intensified. Rafe felt his tissue knitting together, not healing so much as being rewritten at a cellular level. It hurt worse than the initial wounds, like his body was being rebuilt from the inside out. Aerys made a soft sound, distress or concentration. The child's eyes had changed, pupils dilating until they were almost entirely black, reflecting the bioluminescent energy like mirrors. Then the light faded. Aerys slumped forward, and Ceres caught the small body. The child's breathing was shallow but steady, eyes fluttering closed. Rafe pushed himself up. The wounds across his back and shoulder were still there, but the bleeding had stopped. The torn flesh had sealed, leaving angry red marks that looked weeks old rather than minutes. How is that possible? Ceres whispered. You're the scientist, Rafe managed. She shook her head, cradling Aerys. Hybrid genetics don't work like this. Aerys shouldn't be able to. She trailed off, staring at the child with wonder and fear. Rafe forced himself to his feet. Around them, the way station was silent. Bodies of the attackers lay scattered. He counted 8. Are there more? Ceres asked. He checked his scanner. Empty. We need to move, he said. If they reported our position before you nearly died protecting us, Ceres fished. He met her eyes. The clinical distance he'd seen when they first met was gone, replaced by something raw. Yeah, he said. That. She stood, adjusting her grip on Aerys. I need to run diagnostics, she said. Whatever Aerys just did, that was massive energy expenditure. Later. Right now, we get to the ship. They moved quickly through the way station. His wounds might have sealed, but they were far from healed. Behind him, Ceres moved with fluid grace even while carrying Aerys. The vagrant sat undamaged. They crossed the docking tube, and the moment the airlock sealed, he felt tension release from his shoulders. Aerys status, he said. All systems nominal, no signs of pursuit. Plot a course out of the sectors. Fastest route that keeps us in heavy debris. He dropped into the pilot's seat. Ceres secured Aerys in the co-pilot's chair, then pulled a portable medical scanner, running it over Aerys's small form. Cellular activity is elevated but stable, she said. It's like Aerys's body was designed for this. For emergency biological intervention. You didn't design that capability. No. I designed stable hybrid genetics. Cognitive enhancement. Nothing like what just happened. She looked at him, fear behind her eyes. What if I created something I don't understand? She asked quietly. What if the hybrid genetics produced emergent capabilities I never anticipated? Rafe engaged the engines, guiding them away from the way station. Then you deal with it, he said. Figure it out. Keep Aerys safe while you do. You say that like it's simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. He adjusted their course. That kid just saved my life. Whatever else Aerys is, that matters. Then she reached across the space between them, her hand finding his on the controls. Her touch was cool, steady. Thank you, she said. For what? For being exactly what my research said humans could be. Her fingers tightened around his. For proving I wasn't wrong. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The gesture felt natural despite the difference in their biology, her 4 fingers to his 5, her cooler temperature against his warmth. He said didn't account for one thing. What's that? I'm not doing this because of genetics or evolutionary imperatives. He met her luminescent eyes. I'm doing it because I choose to. Something shifted in her expression, walls coming down that she maintained through training and discipline. She leaned closer, her free hand rising to touch his face. I'm beginning to understand the difference, she said softly. The proximity was electric. He could see the faint patterns of bioluminescence beneath her skin. the way they pulsed faster. Her breath ghosted across his lips, cooler than human but carrying a scent like ozone after rain. "Ceres," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Yes? This is a really bad time for what I'm thinking about." "Then don't think." She closed the distance. Her lips against his were softer than he'd expected, cooler but not cold. The kiss started tentative, exploration rather than claim, but heat built quickly. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, careful of the delicate structures of her horns. She made a sound low in her throat, pressing closer. When they broke apart, both were breathing harder. Her luminescence had brightened, patterns racing across her skin. His pulse hammered against his ribs. "That was," she started. "Yeah," he agreed. Aerys interrupted. "Rafe, I'm detecting a transmission, wideband emergency frequency." He dragged his attention back to the displays, though part of his awareness stayed fixed on Ceres beside him. "Source?" he asked. "Neutral trader vessel. Independent registry. Call sign reads as Mako." Rafe straightened. Mako. He hadn't seen the old trader in 3 years, not since a job on the rim went sideways, and Mako had pulled his ass out of the fire. "Open a channel," he said. Static resolved into a familiar voice, rough and warm. "Well, well, if it isn't Rafe Coulson, alive and broadcasting from the ass end of nowhere." "Mako," Rafe said, "you're a long way from civilized space. Could say the same about you." Word on the networks is Cerulean's offering serious money for information on a human smuggler and some stolen property. Rafe's hand moved toward the weapons console. Beside him, Ceres went rigid. "You planning to collect?" he asked carefully. Mako laughed. "Hell no. Cerulean screwed me on a contract 2 years back." The transmission crackled. "But I am curious what kind of property has them sending kill teams into quarantine zones." Rafe glanced at Ceres. She gave a small nod. "The kind that proves some powerful people wrong about how the galaxy works," he said. "Cryptic. I like it." Mako paused. "You need extraction?" "Maybe. Depends on what it costs." "For you?" "Call it a favor repaid. I'm 3 hours from your position. Got room in my hold and I'm headed toward neutral space anyway. It was too convenient." But Rafe's instinct said Mako was genuine. The old trader had always valued reputation over credits. "Send coordinates," Rafe said. "And Mako?" Ceres asked. "As much as I trust anyone." She absorbed that, then looked at Aerys. The child was stirring, small movements suggesting returning consciousness. "We should prepare," she said. "If we're transferring to another vessel, I need to secure my research data. Go. I'll get us to the rendezvous point." She stood but didn't immediately leave. Instead, she leaned down, pressing a kiss to his temple, brief but deliberate. 3 hours, she said, against his skin. Then we figure out what comes next." He watched her carry Aerys toward the back of the ship. His shoulder throbbed where the wounds were still healing. His ribs ached with every breath. But beneath the pain, something else had taken root. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. Mako's ship appeared exactly on schedule. A converted cargo hauler 3 times the size of the Vagrant. Scarred from years of hard use, but clearly well-maintained. Rafe brought his ship alongside, matching velocity while the docking clamps engaged. The airlock cycled open, and Mako stood on the other side, tall and broad-shouldered, dark skin marked with old navigation tattoos. Gray streaked through close-cropped hair, and intelligent eyes took in Rafe's condition with a syngenital speech to Mako, actively walking. "You look like hell," Mako said. "Feel worse," Rafe replied. Mako's gaze shifted past him to where Ceres stood holding Aerys. "So that's what has Cerulean's panties in a twist," Mako said. "That's part of it." Mako gestured toward the corridor. "Come on, you can explain over food." The galley was warm and smelled like brewing coffee. Mako produced ration packs and something that looked like fresh fruit. Ceres accepted the food gratefully, breaking off pieces for Aerys. Rafe explained. "The distress beacon, the research vessel, the kill teams. When he finished, Mako was quiet, fingers drumming against the table. Cerulean's putting out bounties, Mako said finally. Not just for you three. For anyone who aided you. They're serious about making this disappear. Can you get us to neutral space? Aerys asked. I can get you to the outer colonies. Small settlements, loose governance. Place where people don't ask questions if you pay your way. Mako leaned forward. But you need to understand. Cerulean has reach. Eventually someone will talk. Then we disappear, Rafe said. Find somewhere remote, start over. Mako's gaze moved between him and Aerys. You're staying with them, Mako said. Not a question. Yeah, that's a hell of a choice, Coulson. Now you're throwing it away for Mako gestured at Aerys and Aerys. For this. For them, Rafe corrected. His hand found Aerys's under the table. For something that matters. Mako shook their head. Love makes people stupid. But I suppose that's what makes it worth doing. The word hung in the air. Love. Rafe hadn't let himself think it, but hearing it spoken aloud felt right. Aerys's fingers tightened around his. How long to the outer colonies? Aerys asked. 4 days at cruising speed. The quarters Mako provided were small, a cabin with one bed and working environmental controls. Aerys settled Aerys on the bed, the child's eyes already closing. I should stay with Aerys, Aerys said, but her eyes tracked to Rafe. I'm not going anywhere, he replied. She crossed to him, her hands finding the fastenings of his suit. Let me help, she said quietly. He stood still while she worked the suit open, peeling away damaged fabric. Her fingers traced the angry red lines across his back where Aerys's healing had sealed the worst damage. You almost died, she said softly. For us. I'd do it again. I know. Her hands rested against his chest. That's what terrifies me, the way humans choose sacrifice over survival. Is that what this is? He asked. Love. Her luminescent eyes met his. I don't know what else to call it, she admitted. What I feel when I look at you, it doesn't fit any framework I know. He cupped her face. Maybe that's the point, he said. Maybe something. She leaned into his touch. I want this, she said. I want you. Not as research. I want to understand what it feels like to choose connection over caution. He pulled her closer, careful of his injuries, but unable to maintain distance. I'm not going to be gentle, he warned. Good, she breathed. I don't want gentle. I want real. He kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation. His hands found the fastenings of her suit, fingers fumbling until she helped, stripping away the material. Her skin beneath glowed softly, patterns of bioluminescence flowing across her form. He traced them with his fingers, watching them intensify. She made sounds low in her throat, communicating need in a language that transcended species. They fell to the bed beside where Aerys slept, movements urgent but aware. When he entered her, she gasped, and her luminescence flared bright enough to paint the cabin in shades of blue and gold. They found rhythm together, sometimes slow, sometimes desperate. When she came apart beneath him, her whole body lit like a star. The sight pushed him over the edge. After, they lay tangled together, breathing hard. What happens when we reach the colonies? She asked. We find somewhere safe. Somewhere Aerys can grow up without being hunted. And you'll stay? He considered the life he'd built as a smuggler, the careful isolation. Against that, he weighed the woman in his arms, the child sleeping beside them, the sense of purpose that had been missing. I'm staying, he said simply. She kissed him again, softer this time. Then we'll figure it out together, she said. 3 days later, they stood on the landing platform of a settlement called Haven's Edge, a frontier colony where the air tasted thin and buildings were prefabricated structures buried against windstorms. Mako's ship lifted off behind them. Aerys held Aerys's hand. Rafe carried their few possessions, salvaged equipment, Aerys's research data, weapons. A woman approached, the settlement coordinator. She asked no questions about why they'd come. That was frontier hospitality. Everyone had a past. She showed them to a small house on the settlement's edge. Solar panels, water reclamation, a workshop space. Aerys ran through the rooms, exploring with enthusiasm. When the coordinator left, they stood in the main room. "We made it," Sarah said, almost wondering. "We did." She turned to him. "I never thanked you," she said, "for everything you gave up." "I didn't give up anything that mattered," he replied. "I found something that did." Aerys tugged at his pant leg, holding up a small rock, offering it like a treasure. Rafe crouched down, accepting it. "That's a good one," he said. "We'll put it somewhere special." Aerys smiled, the first real smile he'd seen. Then the child threw small arms around his neck. He steadied himself, arms coming up to hold Aerys gently. Over the child's shoulder, he met Ceres's eyes. She was watching them with pure love, unmeasured and uncomplicated. In that moment, standing in a prefab house on the edge of known space with an alien scientist and a hybrid child who'd saved his life, Rafe understood what Ceres had been trying to prove. Connection wasn't about genetics or evolutionary advantage. It was about choice, the decision to care, to protect, to love despite every logical reason not to. He'd bled for them, nearly died for them, and he'd do it all again. Ceres crossed to them, wrapping her arms around them both. Aerys giggled, and the sound filled the small house with something that felt like home. "What now?" Ceres asked. Rafe looked around their new dwelling, at the life they were building from salvaged pieces and desperate choices. "Now," he said, "we live." And for the first time in his adult life, that was enough.